WJZM Bank. Now here's your host, Justin Swallows.
Good Saturday morning to you, sports fans, and welcome on into the Splash. We are honored yet again that you have chosen to kick off your sports weekend with our show. It should be a really fun sports weekend. Lots going on, and we're going to jump around a little bit on today's show. We're going to start out talking a little bit of hockey. We'll talk some basketball and football later on in today's show. Speaking of basketball, the season got underway last night collegiately. Austin Peay was on the road at Vanderbilt, and they hung with the Commodores until late in the contest with right around 10 minutes left to play. The Govs were within 10. They just couldn't hang on long enough, could not get over the hump, and they lose to Vandy 73-54, the final in that one for Austin Peay as the Matt Figger era gets opened up over there, and the Govs will be on the road at Virginia Monday night, so things do not get easier for the men in red and white. For the guys in orange and white, it was a good night. The Vols hosted Presbyterian last night to kick off the 2017-18 campaign, and they blew them out just like they should. It was not a fair fight by any stretch of the imagination, but the Vols did exactly what they were expected to do, and they took down the Blue Hose 88-53, the final score there. As I promised, we are going to be jumping around some today. Later on in the show, we'll talk with the Assistant Commissioner, the Communications Director for the Ohio Valley Conference, Kyle Schwartz, will be with us. And to round out the show today, we will talk with Travis Haney, formerly of ESPN. He's a nationally acclaimed sports writer and published author. He's been following Austin Peay football throughout the course of this season, and we'll talk with him later on. But first, we're going to put the show on ice. We're going to talk a little hockey. The Nashville Predators are absolutely red hot. They have won 3 straight games. They're coming off a nice road swing, coming back home tonight to take on the Pittsburgh Penguins. And here to talk with us about it as we open the show, Justin Bradford from PenaltyBoxRadio.com. He's also the author of The Making of Smashville. Justin, how are you this morning?
Hey, doing just fine. Ready to talk some hockey, and it's about time for them to have a game. It seems like it's been forever since the Predators have played.
Yeah, it took a couple of weeks off because they had the CMA Awards there at Bridgestone Arena, so they were out on the road, and a great road trip. I wanted to get your assessment of that, Justin. The Preds picked up 6 of 8 possible points in their swing away from a CMA Awards-occupied Bridgestone Arena. What do you really like about what you've seen from the team thus far, and what are some things that still concern you about this specific version of the Preds?
Well, the road trip started off a little shaky with that 4-1 loss to San Jose Wednesday the 1st, but the big thing that impressed is they won both games in a back-to-back against Anaheim and L.A., and especially against L.A., who is another team that's been absolutely red hot so far this season. On the back end of that back-to-back, granted, they blew a 3-0 lead with their backup goalie in, but they still ended up winning that game in overtime, and that's what matters, getting those 2 points in the end of a back-to-back. So winning against Anaheim was one of those things that was expected, with the injuries they're dealing with, and then winning against Columbus in Columbus after a couple of days off. Getting those 6 of 8 points is absolutely huge, because what you want to do on a road swing like that is, hey, at least get 50% of your points, and anything above that is great, especially when you're away from home. You have back-to-backs. You want to get at least 50% of the points. They did better than that. Then you had in the trade for Kyle Turris. They did that while they're winning. So that's one of those things that I really like, is that they didn't make a trade because they're losing. They need to make a huge adjustment. Something that had been in the works for a little bit of time there, too, so they make a trade while they're winning to show they really want to continue to improve the team there. So it really sets up nicely for Kyle Turris to making his debut in their rematch against Pittsburgh tonight. But that road trip was actually a really, really good road trip. They made those right adjustments after that loss to San Jose. Get those 4 points in that back-to-back, and then go and travel across the country again to Columbus and have a great showing there. So the right players are scoring. You're getting depth scoring from some guys, and it's not just Philip Forsberg right now, especially in that road trip. And Pekka Rinne is playing absolutely lights out. Some of the things I just want to see them continue to work on is not taking penalties. That's one of those things that the Predators have done a very poor job so far this season. It's taking way too many penalties, and they're having to test their penalty kill, which is still in the top half of the league, but you don't want to continue to test your penalty kill unit and test the other team's power play units, because you're playing a dangerous game when you do that. So they need to play smarter hockey, stop taking so many penalties, and just be better at that in terms of not putting themselves in the box.
Justin, you touched on a lot of things I will want to go back to. Justin Bradford is our guest this morning, folks. He's from PenaltyBoxRadio.com. He's also the author of The Making of Smashville. If you're a hockey fan in general, you don't even have to be a Preds fan. If you love hockey, you should read Justin's book, The Making of Smashville. Really a good read if you haven't read it as of yet, and you can check him out online at PenaltyBoxRadio.com. Justin, like I said, a lot of things I want to get back to. You made a lot of good points there, but I want to start our discussion between the pipes, because although he won his last game out in L.A., UC Saros has been less than stellar as of late. He's 7-8-2 in his last 17 starts, and he's giving up over 3 goals per game. How concerned should we be that the second-year netminder we all kind of fell in love with as a rookie might be starting to hit a little bit of a wall?
Well, I really think with Saros that the big thing with him is he's not getting enough playing time. And a lot of that is because, obviously, Pecorine is playing lights out right now. Pecorine had a great playoffs last year. And so Saros, because he's still so young, he's still trying to develop. He needs to be on the ice more in games. And that's where he's going to be able to shine more, is when he's getting playing time against NHL talent or even AHL talent. So what I personally would like to see out of Saros, and it's nothing against him, it's nothing against the team, is to start swapping him out with Milwaukee a little bit. Now, Anders Lindback from Milwaukee has been playing great. He's doing a great job for the Milwaukee Admirals. But in between playing time, because UC Saros is still waiver exempt, they could be flipping him and still keep him within the rotation of what they expect him to play in Nashville. Let him play a few games in Milwaukee, bring him back up, send him back down. I know it'd be kind of tough as a player to do that, but luckily you're not dealing with time change or anything of that sort, but you get more consistent playing time. That's the reason we saw Saros doing so well before, is that he was coming fresh out of Milwaukee after having played a few games and then playing in an NHL game. He wasn't riding the bench a lot, too. And so that's the problem, is he's getting cold and he's having to come in after not playing for maybe 2 weeks, playing NHL games, sit for another couple of weeks, play an NHL game. Their practice is great. Traveling with the team is really great, too, and gaining that camaraderie with your team. But he needs playing time to continue to develop. There's only so much a practice can do, even against NHL talent. He needs actual, real playing time. One of the things that people notice as well with Justus Saros is that he doesn't play the puck near as much as Pekka does, and the team has to adjust to that as well. It's a team game. The team has to play better in front of him. There were a couple of games, too, where Saros kind of got the raw end of the deal because he was playing in the back end of a back-to-back, in the second game of that back-to-back. The team's a little bit tired in front of them, even though they'll never use that as an excuse, and there's some adjustments they have to make as well. So there are a lot of different situations that he's been put in so far this season where it wasn't setting up nicely for him. Now, it did work out in his favor against L.A., even though they had a 3-0 lead and they blew that, and L.A. was able to force overtime. He mishandled it. He misplayed what the puck was going to do and left the net pretty much wide open, and LA was able to score. That was kind of started their momentum. But he learned from that, and he rebounded from that very, very well, too. Those of you that were able to watch that game, he had very good saves following that really big mistake. And that's what you want to see as a goaltender, being able to readjust, get his mindset back into a game after making a big mistake like that. He was able to do that. So that shows the promise that he has right there as long as he continues to play. That's what I want to see out of Saros. The more playing time he'll continue to develop. He still has very high potential. So I want to stress to people, please do not get down on Justus Saros. He still is going to be a great netminder. He just needs to play more.
Well, I think we've all seen the potential, and we're excited about that. I think you make a great point as well about his lack of playing time this year. He was back and forth between Milwaukee a year ago, and maybe that is the answer for him this season. He has struggled a little bit in his last 17 starts, again 7-8-2. Justin Bradford, our guest this morning, the author of The Making of Smashville. We talk Preds hockey. The Preds red hot. They've won 3 straight, coming back home tonight to take on the defending Stanley Cup champs, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and we'll talk about that matchup a little bit later. But, Justin, first, kind of the risk of showing my ignorance, I want to spend a moment doing something nobody really does that often. I want to criticize Nashville's general manager, David Poile. As James Neal continues his run as a scoring machine out in Las Vegas, I just can't help but wonder, why was it a good idea to protect Calle Jarnkrok instead of him? I've been told they did that because they desired depth at the center position, but now with the trade for Kyle Turris, which you mentioned earlier, it doesn't even look like Jarnkrok is going to be playing at center. Explain to me how letting Neal slip to Vegas was not a mistake.
Well, there's obviously plenty of opinions that circulate, especially on social media, about this, and I understand both, especially when you see James Neal having 9 goals already this season in 16 games, 13 points. It's easy to see that. I think for David Poile, it was looking at the future, and they probably would not have been able to pull off the trade for Kyle Turris had James Neal been on the roster due to the cap. James Neal with a $5 million cap hit, and then you see what Kyle Turris is coming in with. It actually moves the Predators up, and then when Kyle Turris' $6 million contract hits next year, there's no way they would have been able to re-sign James Neal because he probably would have been asking for a raise. So there's a lot of different puzzle pieces, I think, that are fitting into that, because David Poyle mentioned they were interested in Kyle Turris pretty much back in the offseason, so before the expansion draft even happened. So I think if you look farther back, and again, I'm not making an excuse or anything like that. I think I'm trying to analyze what David Poyle was thinking here. So Calle Yarncroke having a very, very good contract and a very good cap hit and adding a little bit of depth there. He's a player that can play in the penalty kill, he can play in the power play, he can play up and down the lineup. Kind of one of those players that's very, very smart with a good hockey IQ. Been looking at James Neal to where he eventually will be regressing a little bit given his cap hit, and then Poyle wanting to add to that center depth. So obviously they're able to sign Nick Bonino. But then I think what Poyle was basically mentioning is that they wanted to make a trade to get another player in there, whether it was Matt Duchene, whether it was a Kyle Turris, so they needed a cap space. And again, they may not be right near the cap, but most teams will operate with an internal budget too, and we've all known the Predators in the past, especially with ownership, that they've had a little bit of an internal budget just because they know what their budget is. They don't want to completely bankrupt themselves by spending all the way to the cap if they can't afford to do that. Now, with their success, they have more income coming in. They can spend more on good players, which is great. So I think all that is going into one of the reasons why they decided to protect Yarncroke over Neal with the cap situation. Weren't sure if they're going to be able to re-sign him, and looking at what they wanted to add, which was the center depth. Was it the best decision? I don't know. It's tough for me to take a stance on that because you see the way James Neal has started the season, and it's been really hot. What if he started off the season with only, say, 3 goals in those 16 games? People might not be near as much up in arms about it, but they see what's happening because he's playing on an expansion team. He's playing on a Vegas team that started off the season really well, and he started off red hot because he's getting top minutes too. He is their number one offensive machine there, so he's going to get that opportunity. Where in Nashville, maybe depending on Philip Forsberg, Victor Arvidsson, Ryan Johansson, more and more players, so maybe he wouldn't get as much of an opportunity too. So all that being said, I'm still okay with the decision that David Poyle made, especially looking at the team now that they have center depth for at least 4 years with that Nick Bonino contract, at least 4 more years of good center depth right there too. And that's what a team really needs to win, at that center depth. We've seen it so much with teams too. Do people still miss Neal? Absolutely. But I think that they're making those right moves to adjust for that, and that's something I've mentioned to other people too. Is that if David Poyle's made a bad move before, like the Del Zotto, Klein trade, understand for the hand, that's just didn't work out. The Francis Santorelli trade didn't work out, but then he goes and makes moves to readjust the team to make sure they're still ultimately competitive. It's all about risk taking as a general manager, and we've seen every general manager take risks. That's how they readjust and rebound for those risks. George McPhee, who's now with the Vegas Knights, did not rebound very well when he was in Washington after making that horrible trade of his to send Philip Forsberg to Nashville, and he was then let go. So it's about how these general managers react to the moves that they've made that maybe people didn't agree or disagree with.
Justin Bradford, our guest from PenaltyBoxRadio.com, as we talk Preds hockey this morning here in the Saturday Sports Splash. And, Justin, we keep kind of skating around this Kyle Turris trade, and I will want to talk about all of what he brings to the table. But first, I want to talk about what the Preds gave up to get him. We were talking about trades and moves and counter moves. We didn't get to see all that much of Vladislav Kamenev in Nashville, but I think we were all pretty impressed with the small sampling we got recently of Samuel Girard. How good do you think either of those guys eventually could be, and how favorably, as Preds fans look back someday, will they look at that trade?
Boy, that's another good question. I think this is another one of those trades that, in hindsight right now, it works out for every single team, because the Predators obviously got the center depth they wanted with Kyle Turris. The Avalanche got good depth on defense and center, kind of replacing what they lost with Matt Duchene for the future. And then also what they got from Ottawa, which was which was a first-round pick, and then they also got second and third-round picks from the Predators. So with Colorado, I think they're really winning for the future. Samuel Girard is one of those, I don't want to say generational talents, but one of those good defensive talents that in 2 seasons he's probably going to be a star first-pairing defenseman. And you can just see with the way that he moves in today's NHL. We saw it on the few games he played with the Predators, and I saw it when I got to see him play over the summer when he was playing for the World Junior Summer Showcase for Team Canada, that he is dynamic. He is the epitome of today's NHL defenseman, which is you don't have to have the size. You just have to have mobility, good feet, and good vision, and he has that. His spin move is absolutely phenomenal when he can pull from the neutral zone and push the puck out to exit the defensive zone. He's very, very good, and he did a lot of that yesterday with Colorado as they're playing Ottawa over in Sweden for the Global Series, and he even notched a point. He was on the first power play unit, so Colorado's giving him a chance to shine already. which David Poole even mentioned, he might have not had that opportunity to trade him had Ryan Ellis been healthy and Sam Girard not been able to play. So it's kind of good for him to kind of get that show off here in Nashville, because we saw that he's going to be a dynamic defenseman. I think people look back and go, man, he's great, but what you get back in return, it's kind of the same thing with Johansson and Jones with that trade with Columbus. Both teams got exactly what they wanted. Nashville wanted a number one center. Columbus wanted a number one defenseman. Seth Jones has been playing amazing hockey for Columbus. Johansson's been great for the Predators, and now he's here for a long time as well. So that being said, people are going to look back and wish they still had him, but then look what you get in return. With Vladislav Kamenev, he has that potential to be a great middle six center. So I think his cap is going to be a second-line center, which is great. You want that depth. He's another one of those guys that works hard. He has great vision. He's extremely smart on the ice as well. He did great things for Milwaukee. I know Milwaukee was really sad to lose him as well. He was a star in their mind, and he had a lot of potential with the Nashville Predators organization. But I do think now, with the percentage that the Predators have, he has a much better opportunity to succeed in Colorado. And, I mean, if you like players, you want them to succeed. So Sam Girard and Vladislav Kamenev are going to succeed with Colorado. So it's really good for them. They're going to get this opportunity. The NHL players, especially Sam Girard, are already getting that opportunity as well.
Well, we've talked about what the Preds are giving up. We've talked about front office moves. We've talked about everything but the big news of the week, and I'm all about burying the lead. I guess we've done that on today's show. Justin Bradford with us from PenaltyBoxRadio.com. And let's talk finally about Kyle Turris. He scored 27 goals last season, and he's off this season to a great starter. At least he was up in Ottawa. How much better can he make the Nashville Predators? And what specific attributes, Justin, is he going to bring to the table that the Preds simply didn't have prior to his arrival?
Well, when you look at it, it's all about depth. One of the big things that I've always been saying to people is that teams will always prepare for your number one line, or whoever the number one players are, those top three scorers. It's the depth scoring that can make or break a team. And we even saw that last year in the playoffs, when it was the second and third line guys scoring, when it was Frederick Gaudreau scoring goals in the playoffs, when it was Colton Sisson scoring goals in the playoffs. Those are the difference makers in the playoffs, because they're the ones that will put a team over the top. You've seen that one extra goal. You need that one extra depth goal, you can win a game. What Kyle Turris does is he adds that depth to this team to where now they have two actual top lines, and then you have a third line that can be a scoring line when Nick Bonino's healthy, whether he's in the center or whether he's playing wing in the top six. Kyle Turris adds that depth you need now to where it makes teams not know how to match up, and that's what you want. You can always put your top defensive pair against the top offensive line, but now what do you do when you have three lines that can score? You only have three defensive pairs in the opposition. So it's going to make it more and more difficult for the opposition to prepare. The Nashville Predators now, Kyle Turris, he's 28 years old, so he's in his prime, and he signed for 6 more years. Just last season alone, he had 55 points, 27 goals, 28 assists, so he's a very well-rounded player. He talks about his defensive game as well, or he's a two-way player. So he's going to add another dynamic on special teams, too, where he can contribute. He's a playmaker. He's a goal scorer. People always are, when people that know Kyle Turris know about his deke. It's a great deke. He can split the defenseman. So he has a dynamic part of the offense that hasn't been there depth-wise. We've had Ryan Johansson here in Nashville for a little bit, but now when you add Kyle Turris to that mix too, you have two centers that can be very dynamic and playmaking skills. And then you have Nick Bonino, who's also a good two-way player that can add to that. So having three centermen, where most teams would be very happy having two of those guys or one of those guys, adds that much more depth to it. He's been a 20-goal scorer 3 times in his career already. And it's not always about goals with him. It's about assists as well. In 2014-15, he had 40 assists with 64 points. So Ottawa lost a really good leader as well. He's wearing an A in Ottawa. So you know that he's a leader. He has the capability of producing offensively. And he's another good guy off the ice. One of those things we also see with the Predators, too, is having a great influence in the community. Obviously, P.K. Subban does a lot in the community. Pekka Rinne does a lot in the community. Roman Josi does as well. So many of those other players. Kyle Turris and his wife have been so active in the Ottawa community that what I've seen so much from Ottawa fans saying, hey, you guys may have gotten a good hockey player in Kyle Turris down in Nashville, but he's also big in the community and his community service and what he does for youth hockey and children in the community as well. So I'm very excited to hear from him and what he wants to do in the community, too, because when players are doing great on the ice, that's great, too, but what the big influence they can make on the community is what they do for it and how they can provide to help the children in the community, too. So it's really good to have another guy like that in the Nashville area.
Sounds like for a lot of reasons we're going to be happy to have Kyle Turris here in Middle Tennessee. We're always happy to have Justin Bradford here in the Saturday Sports Splash. He's the author of The Making of Smashville. We're talking a little Preds hockey this morning. Justin, chemistry was the word that got thrown around a ton early last season as the Preds kind of struggled out of the gates. They've won 3 straight games here. We've said it time and time again. They're coming into a big matchup tonight against the Stanley Cup champs, Pittsburgh. But how much do you worry that the addition of Turris and kind of the reordering, the shuffling of the lines might set this team back a little bit?
I think you might see that maybe a couple shifts. But what we've seen with Peter Laviolette so far this season, he's not been afraid to jumble things. So that first line that we saw of Johansson, Arvidsson, Forsberg has not been playing consistently together the past few games, and the Predators have won. And I think he's very fluid with the way that he's adjusting lines depending on the situation, and we see that so much based on shifts and ice time when looking at the stats. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be a drag on this team. It might just be the kind of thing you might see an errant pass here or there where they're trying to get used to where to expect the other guy to be. But I don't think it's going to be a chemistry issue just based on the fact that Laviolette's been very fluid with the way that he's adjusting those lines and trying to see what's best for the certain situation that's out there, whether they're down, whether they're up, special teams. It's good that he's been able to practice already with the team and not being flown, not coming right in and having to play immediately. So he's able to practice with the team on Thursday at Ford Ice Center. He was able to practice with the team yesterday, having morning skate today. So he's getting a few licks in before having to go out and actually have a game with this team. We have seen it before with trades to where a guy comes right in, they suit up, and they go out there and play, and they kind of look lost a little bit because they're trying to figure it out. So I think having a few days to get settled into Nashville, to meet the guys, to talk to the guys, especially because it's coming from the Eastern Conference, he doesn't get to see these people that often off the ice. I think that's going to be a very, very big thing right there, too, just to have that little bit of comfort when coming out there, too. So he's not like you're not looking like a little lost kid out there on the ice with a bunch of new guys. He's been around these guys for a few days now and been able to acclimate himself to the Nashville Predators way.
We're all excited to see him in action. Justin, the atmosphere has all of the right ingredients tonight for Smashville to be absolutely exploding. It's Saturday night. The Preds have won 3 straight, and the Bad Breath Police from Pittsburgh are in town. What is your prediction on how things are going to play out as the Penguins return to Nashville for the first time since those Stanley Cup finals?
Boy, it's one of those things that's tough. This Pittsburgh team, while they're good, it's really tough to make a prediction because when they've lost sometimes this season, they've lost big. There's a couple 7-1 losses in there to teams you wouldn't think they'd lose 7-1 to. There's that huge loss to Chicago to start the season, and then they've won a couple in overtime. They've lost a couple in overtime, so they're a very roller coastery team. I think with everything going on tonight, I think Nashville does pull this out. Pittsburgh is coming off on the end of a back-to-back, and they lost last night to Washington as well. So they may come out a little ticked off, but I think Nashville, they've been preparing for this. The crowd's going to be really into it. So I'm going to go with a 3-1 Nashville victory.
We hope you're right. We're looking forward to it. Should be a fun atmosphere tonight inside Bridgestone Arena, and it's always fun here on our show when you're kind enough to stop by, my friend. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Justin Bradford, our guest from PenaltyBoxRadio.com, also the author of The Making of Smashville. If you haven't read that book, you can check it out. It's everywhere. You can find books, bookstores, Amazon.com. It's a great book about kind of how things got started in terms of hockey in the Music City. Justin Bradford, one of our favorite hockey guests here on the Saturday Sports Splash. We're done, though, with the NHL as we move forward. We'll talk a little football and basketball next as the Assistant Commissioner of the Ohio Valley Conference, Kyle Schwartz, drops by. He's also the league's communications director. We'll chat with him about what the league's doing to kind of promote Austin Peay as a playoff contender in the football championship subdivision. We'll talk to him about the move of the Ohio Valley Conference basketball tournament from Nashville to Evansville. All kinds of great topics on the board as Kyle Schwartz joins us next here in the Saturday Sports Splash.
Ever lost or misplaced your debit card? Now, before that happens, download the Card Valet mobile app. With it, you can turn your F&M debit card on and off, establish when, where, and how it is used, and much more. And best of all, it's free from F&M Bank. Member FDIC.
Looking to catch the big game with a group of friends? Do it O'Neill style. Want to see a great live band rock the stage? Do it O'Neill style. Hungry for a great meal or just thirsty for an icy cold draft beer? Get them O'Neill style at O'Neill's Bar and Grill, a genuinely great American sports bar. They've got wall-to-wall TVs, huge selections behind the bar, and a menu that obliterates the average pub fare. Clarksville's best times take place at O'Neill's Bar and Grill, located at 1979 Madison Street in Midtown.
Jackson's Body Shop, downtown. Jackson's Body Shop, downtown. It's your car, it's your voice. Jackson's Body Shop, the best choice. Dents, dings, major body repair. A pre-loaner car, 'cause we really care. Jackson's Body Shop, downtown. Jackson's Body Shop, downtown. Call 647-6989 for Jackson's.
There's finally a stress-free, no-risk way to buy a new mattress thanks to Beds Express. With their Triple Z guarantee, there's literally no way you can go wrong. Don't waste another night tossing and turning on your old, worn-out bed. Dive into affordable comfort at Beds Express in Clarksville at 1767 Wilma Rudolph Boulevard, Bellevue at 7643 Highway 70 South, and in Murfreesboro at 2222 Medical Center Parkway. Beds Express, Middle Tennessee's better sleep solution. When's the last time you ate somewhere that uses real ingredients and makes everything from scratch? If it's been too long, you should head over to the Lunchbox at 2124 Woodlawn Road. They're serving daily barbecue plates featuring everything from smoked chicken to baby back ribs. The Lunchbox menu also features the best hamburgers and all-beef hot dogs around, served on freshly baked homemade buns. Save room for dessert because they've got hand-dipped ice cream and milkshakes too at the Lunchbox, just off from Highway 79 at 2124 Woodlawn Road.
WJZM Radio, Clarksville, Tennessee.
We are huge fans of the Ohio Valley Conference here on the Saturday Sports Splash. We love OVC football, basketball, baseball, softball, cross country, soccer. We talk about it all the time here, and we are lucky today to be joined by one of the head honchos over at the league office. Kyle Schwartz, kind enough to be with us. He's the communications director for the OVC, the assistant commissioner. Kyle, how are you this morning?
I'm great, Justin. Good morning. Thanks. I don't know if lucky's the right word, but I'm glad you had me on.
Oh, we're always glad to be with you. Lucky is 100% the right word, and we're glad you could join us. For the first time ever, Kyle, we've been talking around here about playoff prospects for Austin Peay football. Obviously, they have to win out in order to be considered for the postseason. But what insight can you give us in terms of what it takes to secure an at-large FCS playoff bid, and how well, looking at the potential field, will Austin Peay stack up against other teams vying for one of those at-large spots?
That's a good question. I think a lot of the factors, you said win out. Eight division wins is a pretty good mark, that if you get there, depending on how many teams get there, most usually you would probably get in the field. I hear the committee, and they tell us strength of schedule is important, who you've beat's important. Sometimes people think, X number of teams from this conference or X number of teams from this conference. I really don't think the committee looks at that. I think they take everybody individually, look at their resume, and, really past seasons don't really come into play. So when we talk about a team, well, they did good last year, they're on the bubble this year. I don't think you have to worry about that. It's really what you did on the field this year, and I think that 8-win mark would obviously be key. I did some research this morning. It looks like there's 33 FCS teams that could get to 8 wins. I don't know exactly who plays who in the other conferences. 24 spots in the field, 33 teams could get there. That's where you're sort of looking at that bubble of 6 to 9 teams potentially.
That is pretty scary if you ask me. 33 teams could have 8 wins. I know last year there wasn't an 8-win team that got left out of the SCS playoffs. That could be really different this year should that happen, and all 33 teams end up with 8 wins. That's pretty scary for us Governors fans. We're joined now by Kyle Schwartz. He's the communications director for the OVC. And Kyle, I remember Coach Steve Prohm's unsuccessful campaign to get Murray State basketball an at-large NCAA tournament bid several years back. I wanted to get your opinion on how often those public pleas for postseason bids, how often do those really work? How often are they really effective? And what role do you think the league should play in trying to help promote their top teams as being playoff worthy?
Well, I think when you talk about things that end up in newspapers and on ESPN.com, that's really just for fans. The committee, they may hear some of that, but they're not reading news articles saying, well, this team should be on the bubble. They have all the information in their committee room. They're not listening to radio interviews. They're not, reading the stories. They're just looking at the facts. So, anything that year with Murray State, anything that really would have been done above and beyond, I don't think ultimately would make a difference. What we do is on a weekly basis, we have a committee rep on the selection committee that we talk to. And so from the week one till now, we've been giving them information on all of our teams. And as we sort of gone down the season, some teams have dropped off. They're not going to get to 8 wins. They've had some bad losses. So, really right now we're talking Jacksonville State, Austin Peay. So for the last couple of weeks, we're giving them the information. Here's where we are. There's also, a regional advisory committee that has calls on the regional level, and they get information. And those regional calls, they sort of do a ranking. They send it off to the national committee, and the national committee not only looks at the data they've put together, but sort of how these regional committees vote too. So everything that we'll talk again to our committee rep. This coming Monday, we'll talk to him, right before selection. And we also have Greg Seitz, the athletic director of Jacksonville State. He's our representative on the committee. We give him information. So really, 2 people on the committee know a lot about OVC football. Everybody else we sort of hit, they know, they've been watching. They can see the standings. But I feel pretty good in the behind-the-scenes process, especially with the FCS selection committee.
How is the OVC seen nationally in terms of football by members of that committee when it comes to the FCS playoffs? The league has in recent years at least been a 2-bid league. You talked about earlier they don't really look at how many teams from each league they put in. But what's your argument for why this year the OVC should still be at least a 2-bid league? And to what extent, if any, does it throw the selection committee members off, you think, to see a team other than an EIU or a UT Martin in the OVC's second spot?
I like that last question. I think, I did say they don't pay attention to last previous seasons. I believe that's correct. But, in the back of your mind, I think you're always sort of thinking, well, historically, what has this team done? I think for a long time, we got 2 teams in. We had a stigma. We just couldn't get a win. And while that's not fair to carry over year to year, I believe that sort of was, a perspective that was in the back of their minds. But in 2013, that chain, we flipped the script on that. We had 3 teams in the playoffs, 3 teams won. And, in 2015, Jacksonville State proved that an OVC team can go to the national championship game. So, I think that stigma of the OVC couldn't win a playoff game is over. So I think they know that the competition's good. Obviously, Jacksonville State's been a dominant force the last 4 years, so they get a lot of respect. Whoever finishes second in this conference is going to be like, they only have a loss, especially if it's Austin Peay, only a loss to Jacksonville State. I think the committee views that very favorably. And when it comes down to it, I don't know if that's what would be a difference maker in one team over another, but I do think we have respect from what we've done the last 4 years in the playoff.
Kyle Schwartz, our guest this morning in the Saturday Sports Splash. He's the assistant commissioner of the OVC, also the league's communications director. And all of this talk, Kyle, about Austin Peay's playoff push leads me into a question about the OVC's TV deal with ESPN. How much should being featured within that national TV package help a team trying to get noticed by a playoff selection committee? And from the league's perspective, what criteria is used for choosing which teams are featured on ESPN3?
Sure, I think it definitely helps. We're in a changing media landscape, though, where when I started here, it'll be 12 years next week. I've been at the OVC. There weren't a lot of games anywhere. There weren't games on traditional TV. There weren't games on ESPN3. Didn't exist. The OVC Digital Network had just started. Now, the great thing is every one of our games, whether it's ESPN3 or OVC Digital Network, the committee can see. And the best thing, I would say, whether people are on ESPN3 or the Digital Network, on the Digital Network, you don't have to have any special login, any special cable package, and you can watch every game from start to finish. So at the beginning of the year, we always tell not only our committee rep, but the entire committee, we send them a link and say, here, every game's here. It's live. It's on your tablet, your smartphone, your Roku, and then when it's over, it's there automatically. So we get a lot of feedback. Back in the olden days, a decade ago, sometimes we had to get DVDs of games and mail to the committee, which seems so archaic now. But to answer your second part with the selection, we try to do the first 4 games. We've picked matchups based on last year. The last 4 weeks are wild cards. We try to figure the best matchup. ESPN has a little bit of say in it, too. They sometimes say, we haven't had this team on, or we really like this team. We're seeing better numbers when this team's on. So it's really maybe like a 60-40 push, and the 60% of it's our opinion, but ESPN has a say too. And sometimes it's a production issue. If if our production company can't get to a certain location or a certain time works better for them, every once in a while we have to kind of go with what they need, since they're the ones on site making the game happen for us.
Sure, logistics play a role in anything that any of us do. For the most part, Kyle Schwartz, our guest from the OVC's league office. And Kyle, my next question, as we do a lot of times from this show, we're going to kind of come at you from a fan perspective. I wanted to ask, just what are the overall outline responsibilities of the OVC's league office? Because I think fans of some of your member schools, they're sometimes kind of like children. They're always worried about who's the favorite. I remember back several years ago when Murray State won the College Insider Tournament, they didn't feel like the league helped pub them enough. Some fans didn't, and now there are some Governor fans here that feel kind of unsupported in terms of being pushed towards a playoff bid. Is PR and promotion for individual teams, Kyle, is that really part of the league's job description? And what would you say to fans that think the league does sometimes play favorites?
Sure, I think our job is to sort of push the best story, and I'll obviously say that, and I'm very cognizant of it. I know the commissioner is. I think our whole staff is. Everybody is neutral. Like when I put something out that includes multiple teams, we're going alphabetical order. We're spreading around whose pictures on the website. We want everybody to be treated the same. Now, when it comes down to the end of the day, are we pushing a team that's got 2 wins for the playoffs? Obviously not, because they're not have a chance in the playoffs. So performance on the field definitely separates. When you're looking for a playoff spot or something to that effect. So I think our goal is to shine the best light on our team. So whether it's with a push to the playoff committee, whether it's pushing stories for newspapers or whatever, my goal is always to be down the middle and treat everybody equally. And I think we've done a good job. And we've talked about Austin Peay to the committee since. Well, I'll tell you, the first week we really weren't because we didn't know. But since the winning streak started and the 3 wins in a row, we've been talking about them. And I think people are listening. And I do just want Governor fans to know that we like them, Austin Peay, just as much as everybody else. And we're hoping if they win 2 games, they're in the playoffs. If that's going to help not just Austin Peay, it's going to help the OVC, and it's going to help the other 8 football playing institutions, too, to see that a team that lost that many games in a row can turn it around and vie for a playoff spot.
No doubt. I think you guys do a phenomenal job, and I appreciate you being here with us this morning. Kyle Schwartz, our guest from the Ohio Valley Conference League office. And Kyle, anytime I have anybody on from the OVC's league office, I always like to ask at least one question about the future of the league as a whole. How stable is the league's overall membership at this time? What have the behind-the-scenes talks entailed in terms of departures or expansion at this point in time?
Well, obviously there was a lot of talk last summer, or last April, May about membership and teams and other conferences moved. That was very public. I will say that going back, there's that conversation every year, and whether it makes the national news or not, there's always talk about, well, will this team go here? What makes right? And I will brag on our boss. She's very intelligent. She works for our board of presidents, so she keeps them informed. And here's what's happening. If this happened, we could do this. I think at 12 schools, it's the biggest we've ever been, obviously, for the last 5 years. We're more stable than ever. We've only had 2 schools leave since, I believe, 2001. And our core group of teams that have been together for a long time. So, if a school did leave, there'd be no panic. There'd be no dumpster fires or anything happening. We'd make a decision. Hey, do we want another team? Are we good at 11? But I think solid footing, and that really goes back to a great group of presidents, a great group of athletic directors and administrators in our campuses that have really done a lot to boost this conference forward.
Kyle, speaking of the league's future for basketball, the immediate future is up in Evansville, Indiana, and I wanted to ask, how did your preseason media day event go up there, and what, if any, concerns come with moving the OVC's postseason basketball tournament an average of right at 2 hours from just about every member school?
Well, we're pretty excited, and I hadn't been up there until May, and now I've been up there 3 or 4 times from May till now, and our media day event was tremendous. And you can't put a price on how much the city leaders want us there, and that's important. You want to be somewhere you're wanted. You want people to embrace you, and there's a group of local organizing people that are business leaders in that community who take on the responsibility to make this a great event for. It really goes down to our student athletes. We want them to have – it's their championship. We want them to have a good time. And if people listening want to come, the Ford Center, if you haven't been there, and I know Austin Peay plays a game there this December, the men, go there and watch it because it's a fantastic venue. There's a great video board. The parking's easy in Evansville. There's a hotel right across the street. I think people are really going to enjoy being in that building. We're still working on lots of logistics, obviously, since we haven't had a basketball game in there. I think the only concern is we want people to come, and that's the same every year, whether we're in Nashville or Evansville or any other city. So we hope the teams that make it, the 8 men, the 8 women's teams, will bring a lot of fans and really enjoy the atmosphere.
Kyle, on the subject of the OVC basketball tournament, I know the format has been kind of designed to get your best representative into the NCAA tournament. I think that's what every league wants. However, those double byes for the number 1 and number 2 seeds, they seem to have kind of backfired to some extent in recent years. What is the league's assessment of the current tournament format, and what, if any, ideas have been kind of thrown around in terms of possibly restructuring that?
Yeah, that's really every sport when we talk about when to send your best team in. After the season's over, the coaches, men's and women's, they always have a annual meeting in our office. It's usually late April, beginning of May, and that's when they talk about things like that. So I do know the men's coaches talked about it. Is the double bye working? And there's lots of pros and cons, and, quickly, you only have to win 2 games to get in, but if you're not playing until Friday night, you may have had almost a week off. So there's goods and bads. The 12 men's coaches talked about it, and they didn't really want to change for now what they are doing. They thought if you win the regular season, you should have the opportunity to get that double bye. And I believe the first 3 years we did the format, a double bye team won, and then the 3 years after that, a team that didn't have the double bye won. So the data shows it's sort of 50-50, and Belmont's been the regular season champion 2 years in a row, and they've lost their first game. So I don't know what the exact answer is. I think they want to see it happen a couple more years to get a little more data. The women, they changed. They didn't necessarily want the double bye. They went back to traditional 1-8 format, and then 1 year the 1 seed lost to the 8 seed in the first round. So it's really a shot in the dark either way, and you have to win the games on the court, whether you have to win 3 or 2 or 4 games to win the championship.
That is well said, and with the parity in the Ohio Valley Conference, it may shake out the same way either way you did it. You know what I mean? Kyle Schwartz is the communications director of the Ohio Valley Conference, and he is kind enough to be our guest this morning in the Saturday Sports Splash. One last question, Kyle. You've been absolutely great, and I know it's a busy time in the OVC as football season heads down the home stretch and basketball gets fired up. I know almost every team in the league was playing last night. What are some of the still unattained goals the league has for the latter part of 2017, and what are some things that you're really excited about working on in the new year?
Well, the basketball tournament, I think we hit that. We're excited. If fans don't know, we're hosting the first and second rounds of the NCAA men's tournament at Bridgestone Arena March 16th and 18th, and tickets are on sale for that. That's a great chance for fans to come out and see the highest level of basketball being played, and we haven't hosted that since 2012, so that's always something that's fun. And the NCAA actually is here for a site visit next week, which will keep us busy. So those are 2 things basketball-wise. Football, we're looking forward to the playoffs, and we want to make a run, whether it's 1 or 2 teams that get in. Getting in's great, and it's like, oh, we had 2 teams. That looks good on paper, but we want to win games, and we want our fans to be excited. And, if Austin Peay gets in, I think they can definitely win games. If Jacksonville State gets a good matchup, they can definitely win games. So that's what we'd like to close strong and, start the new year fresh with men's and women's basketball going forward. And you mentioned all those spring sports, too. Those won't be too far around the corner once we get to February as well.
Kyle, we will be watching, and we greatly appreciate the work that you do, my friend. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thanks, Justin.
Kyle Schwartz, the communications director for the Ohio Valley Conference, kind enough to join us on a football Saturday morning. And speaking of football Saturday, the Governors of Austin Peay, they're at Eastern Kentucky. They haven't won there since 1977. Only 2 wins all-time in program history for the Governors at EKU. And we'll be joined next by the nationally acclaimed sports writer and published author Travis Haney. He's been following the Govs throughout the course of this season. He's with them in Richmond, Kentucky today, and he'll be with us next right here in the Saturday Sports Splash.
Ever lost or misplaced your debit card? Now, before that happens, download the Card Valet mobile app. With it, you can turn your F&M debit card on and off, establish when, where, and how it is used, and much more. And best of all, it's free. From F&M Bank, member FDIC.
Cooking for large groups is exhausting, and it saps the fun out of hosting parties and events. Let your friends at the Lunchbox do the cooking next time with carry-out catering for small family gatherings up to large company outings. Whether you want barbecue and sides, hot dogs and chips, or homemade chili, the Lunchbox has the food for your next party covered. Call them today at 931-802-8227. Or better yet, go sample their extensive menu at 2124 Woodlawn Road. Fresh ingredients become delicious homemade meals at the Lunchbox, Clarksville's new favorite eatery.
Jackson's Body Shop, downtown. Jackson's Body Shop, downtown. It's your car, it's your voice. Jackson's Body Shop, the best choice. Dents, dings, major body repair. A pre-loaner car, 'cause we really care. Jackson's Body Shop, downtown. Jackson's Body Shop, downtown. Call 647-6989 for Jackson's.
How did you sleep last night? Did you wake up sore or worse yet, still feeling tired? Say goodbye to that constant state of drowsiness with one quick trip to Beds Express. They're fighting sleepless nights one bed at a time, and they're doing so with a trusted staff of comfort experts trained to get you a good night's rest at an affordable price. Go see them at 1767 Wilma Rudolph Boulevard in Clarksville, 7643 Highway 70 South in Bellevue, or at 2222 Medical Center Parkway in Murfreesboro. Visit Beds Express today and sleep well tonight.
Looking to catch the big game with a group of friends? Do it O'Neill style. Want to see a great live band rock the stage? Do it O'Neill style. Hungry for a great meal or just thirsty for an icy cold draft beer? Get them O'Neill style at O'Neill's Bar and Grill, a genuinely great American sports bar. They've got wall-to-wall TVs, huge selections behind the bar, and a menu that obliterates the average pub fare. Clarksville's best times take place at O'Neill's Bar and Grill, located at 1979 Madison Street in Midtown.
WJZM Radio, Clarksville, Tennessee.
It's a huge day for the Austin Peay State University Governors as they try and continue their push towards an FCS playoff bid. They're in Richmond, Kentucky, a place they haven't won since 1977. And we're joined now by a nationally acclaimed sports writer and published author. Travis Haney has been following the Govs throughout the course of this season, and he is there in Richmond. Travis, how are you this morning?
I'm pretty good. Did you think you'd be saying that this year? A push for an FCS playoff berth? I mean, that's not exactly what was on our radar coming in, huh?
Well, we thought things would be better. I don't think we had any clue how much better. And, Travis, I wanted to ask about you in specific. Well, what are your goals behind being sort of embedded with Austin Peay football this fall? We saw a really well-done documentary trailer this week. Are you trying to pitch a movie? Are you going to write a book? What's your end goal for all the time you've been spending with the Govs this year?
I don't know exactly what it is, and that's just being truthful, but I just want to tell the story, you know. I think that's my goal, is just to find a way to get this in front of other people, because it's been really incredible to watch. I think, you know, from you all's perspective, from my perspective, anybody who comes into contact with this story just comes away thinking, wow, I mean, how far this has come in a short amount of time. And just from publishing the sizzle, the trailer that you referenced the other day, I mean, so many people have reached out to me, to Coach Healy, to other people on the staff, and I think there's a hunger, you know, just to see something positive and kind of pure and genuine in college athletics right now. And it's certainly been a blast to be around for me, and I just want other people to kind of share in that as well. So obviously the story gets a lot better if they get a win today and get a win next week at home. But even as of right this second, I mean, to see now 6 victories equaling the amount of wins from 2011 to 2016, I mean, that's already a terrific story. So, you know, I wish I had a better answer for exactly what it is. All I know is we're recording as much as we can, using 2 or 3 video cameras a week during the course of the week and keeping notes. And I hope it's all of those things. I hope it's a documentary. I hope it's a book. I hope it's whatever it is that can get people excited about this story.
I tell you what, how lucky are we as fans of Governors football to have one of the best storytellers in the country telling the story of our football program and the resurgence of Austin Peay football. Travis Haney with us this morning in the Saturday Sports Splash. And Travis, your blog at travhaney.com this week, it featured an extensive article along with that video about how much you've enjoyed covering Austin Peay football. And I thought the most interesting thing from that was that you said you knew last fall that something special was imminent. Last fall, the Governors were winless, and they had statistically one of the worst defenses in the country. What could you have possibly seen then that told you that this incredible turnaround was just over the horizon?
Well, sometimes Coach Healy says that last year, despite being 0-11, that team overachieved. And I think I understand exactly what he means, is that they took 17 players up to kind of close to where we are right now and competed for a half against Kentucky. And to be in some of those games, to have a chance to win, obviously against Tennessee State, to come back late and have a chance against Mercer. I mean, I think that team did about as much as it could given the personnel. But really for me, it was seeing how that recruiting class was coming together and what the staff was able to do. And I just remember the day after they were blasted in the home opener against Tennessee Tech, Coach Healy told me that Jeremiah Oatsfall had called him and said, Coach, there's nothing to worry about. Any kind of loss, any number of losses is not going to make a difference, that I'm on board. And the fact that they got a commitment that day from Trey Pruitt, the tight end from Mount Juliet, who was being recruited by Tennessee Tech, whose high school coach went to Tennessee Tech, and yet he committed the day after a 41-7 loss, I was just like, what is going on here? And the more I was around it, the more I kind of tuned in. I thought, this is going to turn. And I didn't know how much. I knew it would happen this year to some extent. I think that's what you were saying earlier. But, I think we thought 3, 4, 5 wins, something like that. And now I think everybody here just believes. I think they believe today that they're going to be the best team on the field. I think they'll believe that next week. And if you play with that confidence and you have the talent and it's there. It's there in front of them. The opportunity is there in front of them. To try and finish this off. So I think I just saw little bits and pieces of what it could be. And just being around the staff, I just think I have been very, very fortunate to be around a lot of successful coaches, successful programs at the highest level. And I've seen some of those characteristics and some of those traits that those staffs have. And not only does Will have it in the head coaching position, but top to bottom, the staff is organized. The staff is really, really good, obviously, on the recruiting trail. And I just saw enough signs to believe that something like this was coming. I won't say I knew exactly this was coming, but I knew something good was coming.
I think we all felt it to some extent. I think you're right there. Travis Haney, our guest this morning, he's kind of embedded this season with Austin Peay football, telling the story of one of the greatest turnarounds in the game. And we all know him. He's formerly of ESPN, nationally acclaimed sports writer and published author. And how lucky are we to have him telling Austin Peay football's story as they continue towards what we hope is their first ever playoff appearance in school history. Travis, recruiting seems to be the obvious answer. You mentioned it several times there. It seems to be the obvious answer for how this turnaround has taken place so quickly. But not only in terms of freshmen, but in terms of high-profile transfers as well, from Kyle Andrelton on the offensive line to Nate Howard on the defensive front to a couple of high-profile junior college additions. How have you seen Coach Healy's connections throughout the world of college football really help him bring in immediate contributors?
Yeah, and I think there's a certain skill to identifying. And at Washington, Chris Peterson talks about my kind of guy. And I think that's something that Will and this coaching staff prescribe to is they're not just going to go out and get hired guns and bring them in because they were stars or should have been stars wherever they were. They're really trying to identify people who can be a part of this culture and be a part of this change. And I think Kyle Anderton is exactly the perfect example of that. And whenever we tell this story, his evolution as a player, literally from position to position, will be part of the story. Quarterback in high school, a tight end at Vanderbilt, comes in and has the weight to play left tackle and gets better and better and better every week. Plays his tail off, plays with the kind of edge that they want from offensive linemen, and is becoming a central piece of this team. He spoke up after the Tennessee State win in the locker room, evolving quickly into a leader as well. So, to me, that identifying the people and not just the players and the talent and the skill sets, I think that's as important as anything at this level. I'll be honest with you. I mean, I cover a lot of SEC, a lot of ACC. I did not know a whole lot about the OVC. And as anybody who follows it knows, transfers are the lifeblood of how good you're going to be in that given year. And I think it's just so important to get the right fits in terms of personalities and people. And I think they've done a really nice job of that, whether it's Kyle, whether it's Charles Mosley. You mentioned Nate Howard fitting in midstream. I don't even think we've seen anywhere near the ceiling for him since he just kind of showed up in the middle of the season, not really even in shape. I think you're going to see a different Nate Howard physically next year. But, again, I mean, they're just kids who are happy to be here. I remember after the Moorhead win, in the kind of the pandemonium of that post-game scene, I just happened to see Charles Mosley walk by Coach Healy and say, "This is the best decision I've ever made." And that's what Anderton said after the Tennessee State game in the locker room. He said, "I'm so happy I'm here," and he's saying that in Nashville where he just came from. So I think you see kids who are grateful to be a part of whatever this is and wherever it's going. But it's so crucial to get those transfers right. I think EKU, where we're standing right now, is a place where they've tried and reached on some kids and just didn't get that chemical fit. I think you've seen that happen at Martin the last couple of years, that you see these incredibly talented teams that just don't quite find a way to fit it all together, especially from a transfer standpoint.
Travis, what about this staff's ability, kind of on the flip side of that, to develop talent once it gets here? Because I think with all the recruiting success, I'm afraid sometimes that's something that gets overlooked. But when you look at holdovers from the previous coaching staff, you look at a guy like Malik Boynton at DB, or a guy like Tiny Moore, who used to be a defensive back, now is one of the best receivers in the league. To me, when you look at guys like that, you can't help but see just amazing improvement. How would you compare this staff's ability to develop talent with others that you've seen work around the country?
Yeah, I think we're going to see it more with what they do with the younger kids. I think you see it almost on a weekly basis with how special Ahmad Tanner's been as a freshman at running back. I think that's maybe where you see some of the early signs of development. And I'm telling you, Sean Dawkins has been a home run hire for this staff, for him to want to come from Murray, where they had a lot more success, obviously. I think that was such a huge deal to get him. The new additions to the staff, I think, have been great as far as, that development aspect. But with the older kids, I think it's just more of a DNA switch. I think they believe so much more, not only corporately as a team, but in themselves. I think, and that's why you see that shift in a Malik Boynton, in a Tiny Moore, in a James Coleman, in a Max Ewalt. I think that's kind of where that comes from, is that inner belief in themselves. And I think that comes from Will as much as anybody to unlock that potential. I think it's as much of a mental thing as anything. But then on the other side of that, I think one of the first things Will, if he were doing this interview, would say is that's a Chris Laskowski thing. The fact that they got the strength department right, the fact that they were able to get this brand new weight room done, and the strides that they've made have been exponential in terms of what kids can lift, what kids can squat, all of the different measurables that they really languished and struggled with previously. Now they're standing out. I mean, this past summer, they had 85 kids there for a voluntary workout. In June when I was there, the previous year, they said they had 3 kids on campus. I mean, that is the kind of development you're talking about. It doesn't necessarily happen in a practice. It doesn't necessarily happen in a season. But it's happening from a nutrition standpoint and a strength standpoint with Laskowski and his staff.
Nationally acclaimed sports writer and published author Travis Haney, our guest this morning here in the Saturday Sports Splash. We are fortunate as Austin Peay football fans. He's covering our team throughout the course of this season, telling the story of what has thus far been an incredible turnaround for Govs football. And Travis, as we talk about talent development, there are a ton of eyes this season on the freshman quarterback out of Brentwood, Jeremiah Oatsvall. You mentioned him earlier. He's shown us lots of potential in terms of ability, but he's still making some ill-advised decisions at times. How far do you think he is right now from reaching his full potential? And how much better is he at this point in the year, you think, than he was back in early September?
Well, you just see him growing into it. I think he wanted to be respectful. He wanted to be deferential in that competition with Javon Craig, and I think he still feels that way. So I think he's finding his voice in that room as a leader, as a quarterback. So I think there's some of that happening, just kind of that intangible leadership type stuff, that he's growing into that week by week. But you also see him, I think he's throwing the ball a lot better than he was early in the season. You remember when he was thrown into it in the second half against Miami of Ohio, he didn't seem comfortable. He was a little jittery, got better, I felt like, over the course of that game. But now he just seems like he has so much more command of what they're trying to get him to do, what they're asking him to do. But, I mean, I was talking to Wes Satterfield last night about this. They've got to find a way to eliminate that one catastrophic play. Obviously, it was last week late against Tennessee Tech, when they should have put the game away to make it a little bit of a nail-biter there at the very end. But there's one play a game where the snap seems to go over his head. He drops it. They've got to eliminate that. So I know they're hoping today is that day. They got really close, got almost to the end of the game last week without it. If they had a turnover-free game, if they finished plus in the turnover margin today, that's a good sign for any winning team. But with him, I think that's what you really want to do, is not only eliminate those mistakes and bad decisions, but eliminate the catastrophic type turnovers. It seems pretty obvious that you'd want to have that, but you know what? I think they're fine. They're happy to take the good with the bad at this point. They realize they're putting an 18-year-old kid out there and asking him to do a whole lot, but he's very capable. I mean, he wants the ball in his hands. One of my favorite stories this year is just seeing what happened against SEMO there at the very end, against Tennessee State there at the very end. Ball's in his hands, goes down and has about a 35-yard run that sets up the game-winning score. As he's running on the field, he looks at Coach Healy and he says, "You know what's about to happen, don't you?" And goes and leads them on a touchdown drive to win the game. So I think that confidence, and it's real. He's funny. It's fun to see him grow up over the course of this season. And, in terms of potential, I think you're going to see him really start to limit those mistakes. And it's only natural to see a freshman have to kind of learn on the job and make some of those mistakes on the job. But the one thing about him, as we saw at Brentwood Academy and as we've seen some during this part of the season, is he will make a play that you can't really explain. I mean, it will happen at the most opportune time. And he is, we call him the magician around here because of those funny card tricks that he does on social media. And he actually did that with Coach Healy back in the summer for our cameras. He was doing those card tricks back then. But he will make magic happen. He is a winner, and I don't think there's any coincidence that the winning has started now that he's here.
The one word you've said throughout the course of our conversation here, Travis, that I don't think we've ever really said much around Austin Peay football, it's confidence. And there is an air of confidence. There is just a feeling of success around Austin Peay football right now, and I greatly appreciate your being willing to hang around and tell that story. Good luck to you guys today. Bring us home a win, my friend.
We will do our best. Look forward to seeing y'all soon. Talking with you soon.
Thank you, sir. Travis Haney, formerly of ESPN, a nationally acclaimed sports writer and published author. We all know that name, and how fortunate are we as Governors football fans to have Travis Haney telling the story of our football program and the turnaround that's taking place over there at APSU. The Govs taking on Eastern Kentucky today. It's a 12 o'clock kick. And, of course, we'll be watching. We're going to watch, actually, we're going to have a kind of a little impromptu watch party today over at O'Neill's Bar and Grill, 1979 Madison Street. They're streaming the game on a couple of their big screen, flat screen HD TV. So you can go over to O'Neill's, check out the game, grab an order of their delicious chicken wings. I've said it a million times, but I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Those are the best chicken wings you will ever put in your mouth. They are well done, to say the very least. And we're going to go check it out. The Govs against the Colonels there at O'Neill's. Again, the game kicks off at noon. We thank all of our sponsors. Couldn't do it without Jackson's Body Shop. We could not do it without the Lunchbox. We couldn't do it without Beds Express. And we definitely couldn't do it without our presenting sponsor, F&M Bank. If you're looking for a bank, a financial institution, look no further than our friends at F&M Bank, the presenting sponsor of the Saturday Sports Splash. No, we couldn't do it without our sponsors, and we definitely couldn't do it either without our executive producer, John Michaels. A huge thanks to him behind the scenes, making it all work, and we'll make it work again next Saturday at 10 o'clock. But until then, I'm Justin Swallows saying so long, everybody.
Lost or misplaced your debit card?
Now, before that happens, download the Card Valet mobile app.
With it, you can turn your F&M debit card on and off, establish when, where, and how it is used, and much more.
And best of all, it's free from F&M Bank.
Member FDIC.
There's finally a stress-free, no-risk way to buy a new mattress thanks to Beds Express. With their Triple Z guarantee, there's literally no way you can go wrong. Don't waste another night tossing and turning on your old, worn-out bed. Dive into affordable comfort at Beds Express in Clarksville at 1767 Wilma Rudolph Boulevard, Bellevue at 7643 Highway 77.